Hey there, tonight we wander through the soft pink hush of Nara Court Sakura Gardens, as dawn's first light drapes every petal in pearlescent glow. You trudge along a gravel path dappled with drifting blossoms, the air scented like cherry candy, though, let's be honest, it's more floral than edible. And yes, attendants whisper behind you, gossiping as they arrange tiny bronze incense burners, because even in 8th century Japan, nobody can resist palace tea time drama. Remember that crocodile dung sunscreen? Well, this morning you're spared slime, but not spared the reality check that life in the imperial court was as wired with etiquette as your phone is with notifications. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm curious who's drifting off to Sakura stories from Timbuktu or Tallinn. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off a raised wooden veranda onto a flagstone walkway slick with morning dew. Attendants, clad in muted robes dyed from gardenia petals, move like slow-motion dancers, unfurling silk banners that catch the breeze. You breathe in a chill lightly spiced with damp earth, punctuated by the tinkle of distant bronze gongs. It's common knowledge that Emperor Shomu relocated the capital to Nara in 710 CE to unify the Yamato clan under state Buddhism, so this garden, planted beneath Todaji's looming Great Buddha Hall, serves as both aesthetic delight and pious showcase. You feel oddly righteous just by inhaling. Nearby, a lady-in-waiting gingerly tips a porcelain water basin, sluicing drooping petals into a wooden trough. "Have you heard," she whispers, tilting her head, "that some believe cherry trees bleed when cut?" You pause, hand on a lantern-topped post, and watch dew droplets form tiny crimson beads on a wounded branch. Historians still argue whether the legend sprung from lacquer harvesting tales or Buddhist portents. Either way, it gives you goosebumps in an otherwise serene chill. You allow yourself a quiet grin. Spooky bedtime gardens are so last century. A court musician plucks a koto string nearby, the note resonating like an echo through mist. You glance at your slippers, soft straw zores that muffled your steps, wondering if today's attendants preferred them over slippers stuffed with rice husks. Quirky as it sounds, some courtiers slip aromatic rice husk soles underfoot, believing the grains ward off evil spirits at dawn. You imagine tiny phantoms slipping on expired sushi, completely harmless but mildly mortifying. Your escort, a stern-faced gourd-bearer named Shinsuke, parts a curtain of hanging wisteria vines to reveal a formal tea pavilion gilt with aged lacquer. You stop, craning your neck to admire hand-painted cranes in flight, their wings outlined in gold leaf. The pavilion's black pillars swallow stray petals, each landing sounds like a muffled heartbeat. Sensory overload in the gentlest way. As you pause, Shinsuke tips his straw hat and mutters about tomorrow's chrysanthemum banquet, because rumor has it they're brewing wine from flower petals, a practice some poets call more intoxicating than sake. Historians still argue whether chrysanthemum wine ever surpassed plum wine in popularity. But either way, you're betting on a floral buzz tonight. Further down the path, you notice attendants arranging small bowls of river stones beside lanterns. You lean closer and learn that smooth pebbles are meant to symbolize calm minds. They say if you hold one, you'll dream of moonlit crickets. You slip a cool stone into your robe pocket, new favorite bedtime ritual. Even the most polished courtiers here believe in bedtime comfort hacks. It's 750 CE, not 2025, but the need for a fuzzy routine is timeless. Ahead, a rising sun halo peeks through an arched stone bridge. Beneath it, a shallow stream hums over mossy rocks. The reflection of sakura petals drifting on glassy water resembles floating lanterns at dusk. You lean on the bridge railing, feeling the wood grain beneath your fingertips, warm from early morning sun. You recall that in the Haijokyo plan, gardens served as living astronomy maps, pathways align with cardinal points so that at equinox, petals gather in rhythmic swirls. Scholars still debate whether garden designers aimed for cosmic harmony or simply enjoyed geometric layouts, but you can't deny the effect. Wandering here feels like drifting through a gentle star chart. Attendants clad in pale green gather around a stone basin and pour steaming water over polished bronze basins. The hiss of hot water mingles with distant mandarin duck calls. You dip your fingertips into the basin and snap them sharply, no dirty nails here. Meanwhile, one attendant ducks behind a lantern to spit out a chewed-on cherry blossom petal, confessing, in hushed half-laugh, that they tasted of funeral sweets. You chuckle softly, picturing a goth picnic a millennium early. With each step deeper into the grove, petals cling to your hair like nature's confetti. A pair of deer wander in, sacred messengers in Shinto lore, unconcerned by your presence. You manage to resist snapping a selfie with them. After all, even ancient deer demand personal space. You exhale, letting the mist curl around your shoulders. Though mornings here brim with ritual, you find solace in the simple act of walking, petals tickling your sleeves like sleepy cats. And as you trudge onward, aware that a cheeky 8-hour nap awaits later, you remind yourself that even in the world's first permanent capital, relaxation was an art form crafted by whispering petals and purposeful ritual. You pause at the first torii gate, its vermilion pillars looming like ancient sentinels wrapped in drifting petals. Stepping beneath the crossbeam, you feel a subtle shift in atmosphere, as though the air itself exhales a secret. Guarded by two lacquered wooden fox statues, messengers of Inari, you trudge forward, the gravel crunching in time with your heartbeat. You notice the lead guard, a stoic fellow named Hidetaka, lean close and murmur about a midnight blossom ritual reserved for select courtiers. He winks once, which feels strangely modern, like someone hinting at spoilers for your favorite show. The torii's purpose is clear: mark the transition from the mundane world into a sacred realm. It's common knowledge that Shinto shrines used wooden gates long before stone or metal ones became widespread in later centuries. This style predates the 10th century Heian reforms by a good 200 years. You brush a hand along the paint, noticing areas where wood grain shows through, nicknamed whisper lines by court artists for the way they seem to carry distant songs of carpentry workshops. Historians still argue whether these gates evolved from simple boundary markers or were inspired by continental triumphal arches, but either way, they stand here as guardians of serenity. A breeze stirs, sending a cascade of petals tumbling across the gate's torpedo-red surface. One flutters into your mouth, blossom-flavored chewing gum circa 750 CE. If you will. You spit it out discreetly, trying not to attract Hidetaka's stern gaze. He snorts softly, a rare show of amusement, and tweaks his sleeve. Oddly enough, some guards stuffed sleeves with tiny clackers made of bone, believing the soft clicking would scare off night insects. You mentally file that under ancient bedtime hacks, right next to the lotus stone you tucked into your robe. Beyond the torii, the path narrows between mossy stone walls etched with tiny bird carvings. The air smells faintly of incense and fresh pine, a whisper of woodland tucked inside imperial design. Lanterns perched atop cedar pillars remain unlit, waiting for dusk, but you can almost hear the soft glow promising evening warmth. You glance back at the torii's top beam, noting a painted inscription that reads, Ukiyo-mon, the gate of the floating world, a playful nod to both Buddhist impermanence and the drifting petals that make the world seem to hover in pink haze. Fringe scholars propose that this name later inspired Edo period ukiyo-e prints. Historians still argue whether the connection is direct or merely poetic coincidence. Your footsteps carry you under a second torii, smaller yet equally bedecked with silk streamers fluttering like ethereal ribbons. Each streamer bears calligraphy, prayers for gentle sleep, safe dreams, and minimal wardrobe malfunctions in Kumadori-style costumes. Yes, even in Nara, costume crises were a thing. You imagine a courtesan discovering a rogue sleeve dangling mid-ceremony and gasp, thankfully, tonight's focus is blossoms, not wardrobe malfunctions. Suddenly, Hidetaka halts and gestures to a discreet side entrance, a narrow postern gate disguised behind a flowering cherry sapling. You hesitate. Legend says only the Emperor's inner circle gains passage here to witness the petal rain ceremony, where attendants scatter hundred-year-old blossoms deemed especially soothing to the spirit. Mainstream historians agree that Nara courtiers treated cherry blossoms as more than decoration, they symbolized the transient nature of life, a reminder that even imperial grandeur crumbles like petals on stone. You swallow, picturing a million pink fragments drifting like tiny confetti across polished marble floors. The gate creaks open with a breathy sigh. You duck beneath a low lintel, ankles brushing against a carved threshold marked with chrysanthemum motifs. It's said that stepping over the design grants you a brief vision of your future dreams, bright or blurry, depending on your karma that day. Fringe accounts claim one courtier dreamed of teacups growing legs and dancing. That poor fellow never lived it down. Historians still argue whether these dream rituals were widespread or confined to a handful of eccentric nobles, but you admit the idea tickles your imagination. Inside, the enclosed courtyard glows in soft rose light captured by latticed windows. Silk curtains ripple as a hidden breeze stirs, playing a melody of gentle rustles. You spot silver trays laden with dried sakura petals, each petal processed with a pinch of camphor oil to preserve its blush. You pick one up and inhale, floral, slightly medicinal, and oddly reminiscent of cherry-flavored cough drops. You resist making a joke about soothing your throat, knowing you're supposed to be demurely contemplative. Moving forward, you encounter two stone guardians, kitsune figures holding round bronze mirrors. Legend has it these mirrors reflect not your face but your true self, restless or calm. You lift a trembling hand to your reflection, expecting anxiety lines, but instead see a calm countenance framed by drifting petals. You breathe a quiet sigh of relief. You wonder if kitsune had better selfie tactics than modern smartphones, crowdsourced filters provided by trickster fox spirits, perhaps. Your path continues beneath a third torii, its color faded by centuries to a gentle coral blush. You wonder if time itself is conspiring to soften every edge here. After all, nothing wakes you up like a jarring visual in the middle of a soothing narrative. You lean against a moss-covered pillar, fingertips grazing tiny fern sprouts. A guard approaches with a low bow, offering you a small lacquer box. Opening it reveals a paper talisman stamped with a stylized cherry blossom and the character, Dream. For peaceful slumber, he whispers. You tuck it into your sleeve pocket, imagining placing it under your pillow later, alongside your river stone companion. Suddenly, a soft chime echoes, the signal for the secret entry ceremony. Hidetaka motions you forward, and you step onto an elevated wooden platform where attendants chant in low tones. The sound swells like a distant echo, vibrating through floorboards, up your spine, and into your dreams in the making. You realize that this procession likely borrowed elements from Korean peninsula rituals, reflecting Nara's openness to continental influence. Scholars still debate how much Tang dynasty court ceremonies shaped Nara etiquette versus indigenous Shinto practices, but what matters now is the palpable hush enveloping you. As you participate, kneeling and bowing in synchronized motion, you feel oddly in tune with centuries of courtiers who stood here before. A cherry blossom petal lands on your head, like nature's way of inducting you into the garden's secret society. You smile beneath your reverent bow, thinking this is hands down the fanciest secret handshake you've ever experienced. The ceremony concludes as quietly as it began, leaving you suspended in a bubble of ritual and lingering incense aroma. Rising to your feet, you notice a single petal clinging to Hidetaka's shoulder, jet black against his red guard uniform. He brushes it away with a laugh, revealing a faint scar just below his collarbone. You wonder about the stories etched on every attendant here, trials, triumphs, and dreamy petals. You trail him through a final torii, smaller still, almost hidden by weeping willow branches, and step into the next garden alcove, heart light, mind slower, senses tuned to ceremony and Sakura alike. You find yourself descending into what feels like a secret grove, where the stone path vanishes beneath a carpet of fallen blossoms. The world hushes. Even the birds seem to tiptoe in their chirps. This inner courtyard, known by some court insiders as the Whispering Grove, exists off the formal map, tucked behind a screen of woven bamboo. Your guide, Hidetaka, merely nods toward it with the gravity of someone showing you where the moon sleeps. It's cooler here, shaded by arching boughs of cherry trees so ancient their trunks twist like sleeping dragons. You touch one, its bark velvety with moss. Beneath your fingertips, a divot holds water from last night's drizzle, and a small insect floats serenely as if practicing Zen. One scholar you once heard from claimed these groves were designed not just for aesthetic escape but as coded metaphors for poetic ideals, solitude, impermanence, and occasionally, romantic discretion. Historians still argue whether such hideaways were meant for meditation or illicit meetups, but either way, they certainly feel like nature's hush button. As you round a bend, you spot a small wooden bench, low to the ground, lacquered in quiet blacks and burgundies. It's the kind of place where one might quietly compose a waka poem about the passing of time, or maybe just contemplate whether your slippers are waterproof. They are not. You ease yourself down, watching a cluster of petals gather in the crook of your sleeve. Like nature's attempt at accessorizing you. A moment later, an elderly court scribe shuffles by, robes rustling like parchment. He nods in acknowledgement and mutters, "Perfect weather for forgetting one's rank." You smile. This is a place where even the high and mighty abandon the stiffness of court formality, if only briefly. The scribe kneels beside a small stone basin filled with floating blossoms and fish-shaped candles, lighting one with a thin taper. For clarity of thought, he whispers. A fringe belief held that the movement of wax fish on water could forecast how a poem would be received by the emperor. Honestly, you're rooting for a glowing review. He invites you to light your own. The candle flickers, casting ripples across the basin. You feel like you're holding a dream in your palm. In the distance, a soft plucking of a biwa echoes, someone rehearsing, perhaps, or simply playing for the falling blossoms. The sound makes the air feel more golden somehow, like everything has been dipped in tea. Nearby, a scroll sits unfurled on a lacquered tray. It details the garden's plantings, sakura, of course, but also camellia, yuzu, mountain azalea, and one curious note, a lone plum tree gifted by a Korean envoy. You lean closer. The script explains it was said to bloom early out of homesickness. Historians still debate whether this is metaphor or fact, but you imagine a tree, quietly yearning for home, offering the garden its first blush of pink each year. The scribe chuckles as he sees you reading. They say the plum tree whispers when no one's listening, he says. Or maybe that's just me. You raise a brow, but there's a gleam in his eye, a court jester's humor wrapped in an old man's wisdom. A light joke, but one that gently nudges your imagination awake just enough to stay on the edge of dreaming. You rise and follow a winding trail deeper still, where the garden shifts once again. Now the ground is paved in flat, irregular stones set in wave-like patterns. This is the meditative path, sometimes called the silent ripple. It's said that monks once walked it barefoot each morning to feel the breath of the earth. You try it, tentatively sliding your slippers off and pressing your soles to the cool stone. You wince. Then you smile. Somehow, the discomfort feels ancient, dignified. Fringe belief holds that the pattern massages key pressure points and unlocks memory pathways. You try to recall your 8th grade lunch menu. Nothing. But you do remember a story of a court lady who claimed to dream more vividly after walking this path each evening. Up ahead, a narrow wooden sign reads Tsukigakure, or moon-hidden path. Its name stems from the idea that you're walking not in the moonlight, but through it, like slicing through a dream with each step. You squint upward through the canopy and, true to form, sunlight flickers like broken moonlight through the blossoms. You think, yeah. That tracks. The path ends at a raised wooden platform, the kind used for informal poetry gatherings. A low, three-legged table holds brushes, ink stones, and a sheaf of paper so thin it seems woven from mist. You're told anyone may compose a verse here, should inspiration strike. You lift a brush, surprised by how heavy it feels. You write one line. Unsure if it's poetry or grocery list. Still, you're told the act of writing is what matters. You leave your scroll on the table, tucked under a river stone. As you rise, the scribe reappears, beckoning you onward. He tells you the next garden is called Sleeping Petals, named not for the flowers, but for the people, courtiers who often wandered there to nap between ceremonies. This was before melatonin supplements, after all. You nod, thinking it might be your favorite stop yet. You pass under one more wooden arch strung with bells. A breeze sets them tinkling like laughter in a library, light, scandalous, but oddly welcome. You find yourself humming along with the tones, the melody catching in your chest like an old lullaby. Even the insects here seem tuned to a lower volume, as if mindful of the sleepiness baked into the very soil. As you prepare to enter the next grove, you look back at the Whispering Grove one last time. It feels smaller now, as if it's folded itself away, tucking its secrets behind veils of moss and memory. You promise yourself you'll return, if not in body, then in dreams. And really, what's the difference, when your dreams smell like blossoms and sound like biwa strings? You step quietly into the grove known as Sleeping Petals, a low-lying garden bordered by lichen-covered boulders and ringed with cherry trees so dense their branches knit overhead like an embroidered silk canopy. The light changes here. It doesn't simply dim, it melts. The air feels denser, like walking through honey with a blush of floral perfume. Beneath your feet, the ground is layered in soft moss and decades of fallen blossoms, forming a natural mattress where nobles once napped in full ceremonial robes. Drool be damned, you find a raised wooden deck tucked beneath a willow tree, its fronds trailing the earth like gossiping sleeves. Courtiers, they say, use this platform as a designated dream station. Taking midday rests between poems, diplomacy, and the excruciating responsibility of maintaining graceful posture. While today's corporate nap pods come with app-based timers and ergonomic foam, the Nara elite simply trusted in shade, scent, and a particularly comfy neck roll called a makura. You're handed one by an attendant who appears like a ghost in brocade. She bows once, then vanishes behind a screen. You lay the cushion behind your head and sink into the decking, which creaks gently in approval. Mainstream historians agree that court etiquette books from the 8th century often reference the benefits of dreamful pauses. One scroll, the soft record of serene minds, describes sleep as the moment the soul arranges its clothing. That same document also recommends stuffing your sleeves with wisteria petals to invite pleasant visions. You don't question it. Wisteria smells amazing. You may be tempted to steal a handful later, consequences be darned. A breeze rustles the trees, and overhead, petals drift in hypnotic spirals, catching shafts of light like slow-motion confetti. You watch them land silently on the garden's gravel borders, forming accidental mandalas. A scholar once claimed the layout of Sleeping Petals was based on an early mandala diagram imported from Buddhist monasteries in China, though others argue it's just really good landscaping. The debate continues. Either way, you're grateful for the accidental beauty. To your left, a pair of ladies-in-waiting sit cross-legged on a cushioned bench, eyes closed, kimonos like spilled watercolors. One of them snores, softly, politely, like a kitten sighing. You stifle a giggle and nearly lose it when her companion delicately reaches over to adjust a fallen cherry petal on her friend's nose. It's courtly slapstick, and it's perfect. You imagine ancient etiquette classes featuring units on graceful snoring and the discreet repositioning of wayward petals. A tray of small dishes is placed beside you, tiny pickled plums, a morsel of rice shaped like a flower, and a miniature bowl of chilled sakura jelly. You're told this was the pre-nap snack, meant to calm the stomach and sweeten the dreamscape. You try a spoonful. It tastes like dew on the last day of spring, light, fragrant, and somehow tinged with the memory of poetry. Your body responds by stretching involuntarily. You yawn. Everyone yawns. Even a nearby cat sprawled under a garden stool rolls onto its back with theatrical exhaustion. Cats have always understood gardens better than people. Across the way, a circular sand garden lies undisturbed. Raked in delicate spirals, its center features a single stone carved into the shape of a sleeping fox. Local legend claims the fox is enchanted and once served as a dream courier, delivering messages between slumbering courtiers and their loved ones. It's probably just a decorative rock, but part of you wants to whisper your next grocery list to it, just in case. The garden's border wall is low and rounded, unusual for this period. A few fringe historians believe it was designed to resemble the gentle curve of a futon, reinforcing the theme of restfulness. Others argue it's simply made for a more aesthetically pleasing boundary when viewed from above. Either way, you trace the curve with your eyes and feel your breathing slow. Everything about this place, its shapes, textures, and scents, has been composed like a lullaby. A small boy, no older than 10, tiptoes past with an armful of bamboo fans. He pauses, fans you once, gently, reverently, then leaves one at your side. Painted on its surface, a serene fox curled beneath a blossoming tree. The signature in the corner is from Lady Tomo, a famously talented painter from the imperial household who reportedly worked only during thunderstorms. Historians still argue whether she existed or was a pseudonym used by several female artists who weren't allowed to sign their own names. You quietly thank her anyway. The fan's breeze stirs a corner of your robe. A petal drifts into your lap and stays. You stare at it for a while, wondering how something so ephemeral can feel so weighted with calm. You feel your limbs getting heavier, your thoughts looser. This is the tipping point, where alertness gives way to trance, where history stops being a subject and becomes a setting. A servant walks by balancing a tray of what look like silken eye masks. One of them is embroidered with a sleepy carp. You accept it, slip it on, and let the world fade to blush-tinted blackness. Under the mask, the petal scent lingers. The distant biwa song returns, no longer plucked but hummed, as though the instrument is dreaming of being played. You swear the wooden deck beneath you rocks, just a little, as if floating, somewhere. A soft gong chimes once. It doesn't wake you, not really. It just nudges your inner ear, reminding you to stay tethered. The sound is said to come from a bell forged of 7 metals, meant to ring in harmony with the wind. Courtiers believed if the bell chimed while you were asleep, your dream would reveal something hidden, an emotion, a poem, a lost slipper perhaps. You listen for it again, but the moment has passed. Like a blossom caught mid-fall, your mind wavers. Hidetaka appears beside you, impossibly quiet for a man in armor. He leans down and whispers, "The next garden awaits. If you're ready." You're not. But you rise anyway, like a ghost of yourself, sleep-drunk and petal-dappled, stepping forward into the next layer of stillness. You follow Hidetaka past a bamboo gate, its slats tied with silk cords faded to the color of rosewater. A court attendant unties one slowly, as if unwinding time itself, and the gate swings open to reveal the moon-viewing pavilion. Unlike the wooded groves you've just left, this garden feels airier, wide spaces, clean lines, a gravel courtyard raked into lunar arcs, and a small pond as still as lacquer. The sakura trees here are spaced intentionally, as if choreographed, each branch reaching not at random, but with purpose, like calligraphy in tree form. A long platform stretches out over the pond, made of hinoki wood so pale it glows faintly under the midday sun. You step onto it. And it creaks in a rhythm you begin to match, step for careful step. This is where nobles would gather during tsukimi, moon viewing nights, when the full moon reflected perfectly in the pond below, creating the illusion of two moons, or perhaps, a portal. Look down, Hidetaka says. You do. The water holds your reflection, blurred with blossoms. For a moment, you swear you see a different face, longer hair, painted brows, a courtier's serene half-smile. But then it's gone. You're just yourself again. Which is fine. Mostly, the moon viewing events were less about astronomy and more about aesthetic surrender. Court members wrote poems in the moon's honor, sipped sake infused with chrysanthemum petals. And, according to fringe accounts, occasionally tried to recite entire sutras backward for good luck. Historians still debate whether these reversals were part of spiritual practice or simply a tipsy parlor game that got out of hand. Either way, it sounds like something worth attempting after 2 cups of blossom wine. A low table is set on the platform now, waiting. Upon it, an inkstone, brushes, and a bowl of salt-pickled radish slices, believed to sharpen poetic clarity. You nibble one. It's crunchy, assertively sour, and unexpectedly motivational. You find yourself murmuring the first line of a poem you didn't know you had in you. Something about reflection, perhaps. Or the faint loneliness of mirrored moons. A breeze picks up, carrying the scent of incense. Somewhere nearby, someone has lit agarwood, prized for its rich, sweet woody perfume. It was said to awaken the senses just enough to keep moon viewers from dozing off mid-verse. And yet, you feel your eyelids heavying again. Maybe you're just built differently. Like a very soft moss, at the pavilion's edge, a woven mat is laid out facing the pond. A scroll lies there, weighted by a polished stone shaped like a rabbit, an homage to the folklore that a rabbit lives on the moon, forever pounding machi. You sit cross-legged, the mat warm from the sun, and skim the scroll. It's a list of the best poetic themes for moon viewing: dew, longing, the sound of distant flutes, hair unpinning itself in the breeze. You try one, the moon watches, and I pretend not to notice. It's not terrible. At least the moon seems entertained. A court lady glides past you in robes of pale blue. She leaves behind a trail of what appears to be starlight, but turns out to be crushed mica in her hemline. She hums softly. The tune feels ancient, like something whales might have invented and forgotten. You feel a twinge of envy. Not for her outfit, though, yes, that too, but for the effortless way she seems to float. Meanwhile, you're reasonably sure you just heard your knees pop. Next to the pond, a miniature stone lantern stands on 3 legs. Inside, a flickering candle has been placed with precise care. On full moon nights, the flame was said to act as a third moon, giving rise to the poetic concept of triple moonlight. Fringe poets believed this configuration could briefly open the Himera realm, allowing glimpses of one's past life. Historians, understandably, remain divided on this. You peer into the flame anyway. Just in case, you notice a small wooden box tucked behind the lantern. Inside, slips of paper folded into fans, each inked with a moon-related proverb. You draw one at random. It reads, "Even the moon gets lost in the fog." You pause. Hidetaka chuckles softly. "Very on brand for tonight's weather," he says, "though there's not a cloud in the sky." You look up. Just blue, and a half-sketched moon hiding behind daylight. In the center of the pond, a single platform floats on tide barrels. On special evenings, a court performer would sit there, playing the koto, the long, flat harp-like instrument whose notes sound like time unspooling. The sound would drift across the water, reaching the listeners in fractured, echoing tones. You imagine it now, the notes curling like smoke, finding your ears not all at once, but piece by piece. Music, fragmented by moonlight, an open scroll on the nearby table documents a moon viewing event from 734 AD, during which the Empress herself composed a waka comparing the moon to a bowl of tears too beautiful to drink. Another noble reportedly fell asleep face first in his lacquer tray and later claimed to have dreamt the moon complimented his poetry. This account, naturally, is suspect, but charming. As the sun dips slightly lower, shadows stretch across the raked gravel, and the arcs begin to resemble the lines on a giant, sleeping face. You trace one with your eye, wondering if this is a hidden message from the garden's designer or simply what happens when your brain slips into dream mode. Hidetaka motions gently, it's time to move on. You stand, brushing a few wayward petals from your lap, and take one final look at the pond. The surface has darkened slightly, catching the sky in softer hues. For a moment, you can almost see the twin moons again. Almost. Then they vanish. You step back onto the garden path, feeling lighter. As if a bit of you stayed behind, trapped in that water. Blinking back at your reflection with serene detachment. The pavilion grows smaller behind you, but the echo of the flute, the rabbit-shaped stone, and your unspoken poem trail behind you like a soft-footed procession. The next garden awaits, one of shadows, lanterns, and a koi pond deep enough to lose your name in. The light shifts again as you follow the winding path into the next garden, this one older, quieter, and somehow cooler despite the sun still winking through the branches. Gravel crunches beneath your sandals in a soft, satisfying rhythm as a rust-colored torii gate looms ahead. Unlike the bright vermilion gates you might picture from postcards, this one has faded into a gentle ochre, its wood smoothed by time and the casual reverence of 1,000 passing sleeves. You duck slightly as you walk beneath it, almost by instinct, though you're fairly sure it wasn't necessary. Still, no harm in showing a little humility when entering a space like this. This is the Garden of Still Waters. Famed in its day for its koi pond, and the ghost stories that pooled around it like mist on a spring morning. Before you even see the water, you hear it, a gentle ripple, a distant plop, and the near-silent whisk of a net being drawn in somewhere out of sight. When you finally round the corner, the pond reveals itself like a dream half-remembered, dark, mirror-like, fringed with reeds and maple saplings just beginning to green. The koi drift like thoughts, slow, bright, impossible to pin down. Fat golden white ones coast beneath the surface like bored nobles, while a moody black fish stalks the bottom with suspicious grace. According to mainstream accounts, some of these koi were hand-fed by the emperor himself. Or at least by his most trustworthy snack-offering delegate. They were trained to respond to the sound of clapping, though, in truth, they likely just knew when lunchtime was. Still, the idea of aristocratic fish with a sense of schedule is endearing. You settle onto a worn stone bench beside the water. It's slightly uneven and bears a groove where centuries of robes have smoothed the surface. A cicada clicks once, loudly, then falls quiet, as if realizing it's too early in the year to be dramatic. An old man in court robes hobbles up to the pond's edge. He carries a bamboo flute tucked into his sash, though he makes no move to play it. Instead, he scatters something into the water, rice flakes or dried yam peelings, perhaps, and the koi respond immediately. He smiles without looking at you. They remember, he says, almost to himself. Whether he means the fish or someone else entirely, you choose not to ask. The pond has a bridge. Of course, curved and arched just so, with railings carved into the shape of gently writhing dragons. The symbolism is subtle enough to keep the mood tranquil, but just edgy enough to suggest that maybe, just maybe, something magical once lived under this water. Court records mention an incident where a young scribe claimed to have seen a woman in white, gliding just below the pond's surface. She smiled at him, then vanished. Historians argue whether this was a metaphor for courtly love, sleep deprivation, or the beginning stages of fermented rice wine poisoning. You scoot a little closer to the edge, just in case she's still around. A narrow path branches off behind the pond, leading to a clearing with a small shrine tucked among the trees. Here, nobles once came to leave offerings for safe dreams or guidance in romantic entanglements. A particularly cheeky court diary describes how one lady-in-waiting left a pair of embroidered slippers as an offering to walk away from scandal. They were gone by morning. Whether the gods took them or a squirrel with stylish taste is unknown. You pass a row of stepping stones leading to a hidden pavilion, roofed in thatch and open on all sides. Inside, cushions are arranged in a wide circle around a central brazier, though it hasn't been lit in some time. The scent of old cedar smoke lingers. A lacquered box sits in the center. When opened, it reveals a set of hand-painted fans used in storytelling games. Each fan bears a single image: clouds, a deer, a rice field under moonlight. The game involved creating impromptu tales based on your draw, often with humorous or scandalous twists. You try one, a fan painted with a turtle carrying a tea kettle. The story writes itself, and involves a surprisingly bureaucratic sea god. Outside the pavilion, a row of flat stones marks the spot where courtiers once performed slow, stylized dances. The movements were based not on choreography as we know it, but on mimicking elements of nature, becoming the ripple of water, the flutter of a moth, the hesitation of a falling leaf. One diary entry notes that a particularly expressive performance once caused a noblewoman to faint from sheer emotional overwhelm, or possibly from the tightness of her obi. Again, historical consensus wavers. A stone lantern tilts slightly, casting a dappled shadow across your feet. At its base lies a small clay figure of a fox, curled asleep. It's different from the one in the earlier garden. This one is more cartoonish, with wide eyes and a mischief-marked grin. A local legend claims this fox statue grants restful sleep, but only if you gently tap its nose and whisper your favorite soup flavor. You oblige, feeling faintly ridiculous, but also, oddly, soothed. The breeze here is cooler, tinged with the scent of pine and something else, green tea, perhaps, or moss warmed by sunlight. It carries with it the barely there sound of distant bells, though you see no temple. Hidetaka appears again, sitting cross-legged beside you without a sound. They say if you fall asleep here, he murmurs, your dreams travel upstream to the source of the pond, where they are washed and folded. You nod slowly. That makes as much sense as anything. Before you rise, you dip your fingers into the pond. The water is colder than expected, and perfectly clear. A koi brushes past your hand, trailing bubbles like tiny bells. You whisper goodbye to it, though you don't really know why. It just seems polite. As you step back onto the main path, a final breeze stirs the trees and scatters a few blossoms into the pond. They float, join, drift apart, like memories with nowhere urgent to be. The garden fades behind you, but you carry the stillness like a well-wrapped package. There's another space ahead now. You catch a glimpse of it through the trees, stone lanterns, low steps, and a structure that hums with the silent dignity of ritual. A tea house. And within it, the slow ceremony of taste, silence, and steam. The path narrows and darkens briefly, drawing you forward through a tunnel of twisted pines and nodding grasses. You can hear water again, not a pond this time, but a stream, threading its way past mossy stones and disappearing beneath a low wooden platform up ahead. The air here feels cooler, denser somehow, as though it's been steeped in patience. You arrive at the tea house without ceremony. No gate, no fanfare, just the simple presence of the building, waiting like an old friend who doesn't mind if you're late. The roof is thatched and slightly sagging, the beams exposed and dark with age. A line of wooden sandals rests neatly along the entrance, though no one else seems to be here. A bell chimes gently in the wind, just once. Whether from the breeze or a courteous ghost, you're unsure, Hidetaka gestures for you to remove your shoes. You slip them off and step onto the raised floor, the wood warm and slightly uneven beneath your feet. It creaks politely as you move, a sound as welcome as any greeting. Inside, the light is diffused through shoji screens, casting everything in soft cream and gray, like the inside of a pearl. The tea ceremony is about to begin. Or rather, it always is. In Nara court life, the tea house was not just a place for refreshments, it was a spiritual cul-de-sac, where time could circle, pause, or meander sideways. The tea master enters, a woman of uncertain age and infinite calm. Her sleeves whisper as she moves, and her hair is held in place by a single bone pin, elegant in its plainness. She does not speak to you, not out of rudeness, but out of ritual. Words, here, are brewed slowly and only sipped when needed. You kneel on a straw mat that crackles gently under your knees. A small black kettle sits atop the hearth, its iron belly humming with rising steam. The scent of roasted green tea drifts up, not matcha this time, but hojicha, with its nutty, toasted notes and caramel warmth. It's a tea that feels like a memory, slightly sweet, slightly sad, always welcome. Each movement the tea master makes is deliberate, folding the cloth, rinsing the cup, scooping the powder. Historians still debate how formalized these rituals were during the Nara period. Some argue that full tea ceremony forms developed later, while others insist that early versions existed here, quieter but no less sacred. Either way, you watch her hands and feel time melt around you. A fan rests at her side, bearing a single brushstroke, a character meaning emptiness, or perhaps pause. Depends on the scholar, really. You like both interpretations. As she whisks the tea, her motions become almost hypnotic. The bowl, simple and imperfect, is passed to you with a bow. You bow back, though yours is probably clumsier. You take the bowl. It's warm. You turn it slightly, an old custom, so as not to drink from the most beautiful side, and sip. The taste is earthy, like rain on stones. A tiny bitterness gives way to warmth, then calm. You exhale. Nothing changes, and yet everything has shifted. On a nearby shelf, small offerings are arranged: dried plum blossoms, a strip of dyed silk, a single poem written in faint, shaky ink. Even in stillness, the sky drips tea. Probably not a classic, but evocative enough to linger. You notice a square of rice paper resting near your mat. A small ink stone has been set beside it. Hidetaka nods toward it, murmuring, "Some guests write a feeling, rather than a thought." You oblige. The ink is slow to take, and your brushstroke wobbles, but you manage a single character. You're not entirely sure what it means. But that's part of the point. A light tapping sound breaks the silence. Rain, at last. Just a few drops, gentle and sparse, like the tea house is being politely reminded of the outside world. You glance toward the garden beyond the shoji screens. Rain beads on the leaves, turns the gravel darker, and makes the world smell sharper, like pine, wet ash, and crushed mint. According to some obscure accounts, tea was once used by Nara courtiers as a method of subtle matchmaking. The type of tea offered, strong or light, floral or earthy, was a way of signaling interest or aloofness. A shared liking for hojicha might imply a preference for comfort over passion. You wonder what your bowl of toasted leaves says about you. Probably that you're sleepy, polite, and prone to introspection. Fair enough. The tea master bows once more and clears the bowl, as silently as she arrived. She leaves behind a small dish of sweet bean paste wrapped in a pickled cherry leaf. You bite in. It's the right kind of soft. The kind that makes you forget how complicated things are. Just for a while, you sit in silence a bit longer, watching the rain grow more confident. Somewhere above, a bamboo gutter begins to drip in rhythm, like a slow metronome for a lullaby that hasn't yet begun. The tea house isn't just about tea, of course. It's about choosing to be still. To let yourself melt, a little. Like sugar in a warm cup, before you rise, you press your palms lightly to the floor, just a moment of grounding. The wood is warm still. You bow to the tea space, as you've seen done, and step back into your sandals. Outside, the rain stops as suddenly as it began. The sky is bluer now, the air crisper. You feel a little more steeped. In quiet, in calm, in something very old and very simple. Hidetaka says nothing, but offers you a small paper-wrapped parcel. Inside, a single sencha leaf and a scrap of the poem you read earlier. A souvenir, perhaps. Or a reminder. Or both. You tuck it into your sleeve. Ahead lies a different kind of space, one of laughter, murmurs, and paint. A small theater. The performance is about to begin. And you, lucky wanderer, have front-row dreams. The path grows livelier now, as if even the moss underfoot has perked up in anticipation. You follow the soft echo of clappers, a sharp, rhythmic con-con sound, guiding you like breadcrumbs through an avenue of lanterns. These aren't the solemn stone ones from the koi pond. No, these are painted wood and paper, hung at different heights, each one adorned with scenes that flicker faintly as the breeze nudges the flames inside. There's a monkey playing a flute. A cart full of turnips. A tanuki with a suspiciously wide grin. You pass beneath them all, the lanterns bobbing like curious little spirits. You arrive at a small open-air theater nestled in a natural dip in the earth. It's modest in size but rich in atmosphere, like something that bloomed out of a poem instead of being built with hammers. The stage is little more than a raised wooden platform framed by drapes of indigo cloth. The backdrop? A painted screen showing rolling hills, a single pine, and a crane mid-flight. A nice bit of symbolic multitasking, longevity, steadfastness, and poetic moodiness all in one bird. You take a seat on one of the low benches scattered around the space. Each one has a cushion, some slightly threadbare, others clearly replaced more recently, with floral prints that clash just enough to feel charming. Hidetaka sits beside you, cross-legged, cradling a small jar of pickled plums as though it's a snack and a security blanket. Performances in the Nara court weren't always formal spectacles. Sometimes they were spontaneous affairs, where noble ladies and page boys alike would step into roles for an evening of gentle mockery and lyrical improvisation. Tonight's tale. A classic folk farce, a proud village elder tries to outwit a clever fox who just wants his rice dumplings back. There's puppetry. There's a wig that's definitely made from repurposed mop strands. There's a musical interlude played on a single-string zither that's wildly out of tune, and all the better for it. The narrator begins with a flourish and a yawn, an opening joke about how even foxes get bureaucratic headaches. The crowd, modest but attentive, chuckles softly. Among them are a few courtiers with fans half-raised, pretending disinterest in the most practiced way possible. Nearby, a child laughs too loudly and gets gently shushed by a retainer whose topknot is coming undone. You're not sure if they're part of the play or just part of life here. One historical record describes these performances as theatrical size. Not grand, not extravagant, but oddly therapeutic. A break from the layers of etiquette and decorum that wrapped the court like ceremonial silk. Instead of court music that demanded precise posture and stoic attention, these plays invited the audience to slouch a little, to snort softly at a punchline, to feel the warm press of shared amusement. A puppet appears, voiced by someone clearly improvising. It speaks in a falsetto, wagging its tiny cloth paw. If you won't return my dumplings, at least give me back my nap. It whines. The elder character responds by offering him a radish and unsolicited advice on foot care. You can't help but grin, historians still argue whether these comedic interludes were officially sanctioned or tolerated with an indulgent shrug. One theory suggests they were a clever way for courtiers to critique each other without consequence, hiding sharp commentary inside fables and giggles. Others believe they were simply a bomb, a soft pressure release valve for a palace wound tight by rituals. A new character shuffles on stage, a woman disguised as a pine tree, trying to eavesdrop on the fox's schemes. She wears a headpiece that's clearly made from actual branches, some of which still have ladybugs clinging to them. Her entrance line: "I am but a humble tree, pay me no mind unless you're into photosynthesis." Hidetaka wheezes with delight beside you. Behind the stage, you notice a curtain flutter slightly. A peek reveals an assistant quietly sipping tea and mouthing the next lines. His kimono has plum sauce stains. A true professional, as the story unfolds, complete with mistaken identities, a goat's unexpected tap dance, and a closing haiku delivered from inside a laundry basket, you find yourself forgetting that you're in a palace garden. You're simply here, laughing softly in the dark with people from a different century, warmed by lantern light and an absurd fox in pursuit of justice via steamed dumplings. The play ends with a bowed curtain call. The puppets lie slumped, the narrator yawns theatrically again, and the audience applauds with gentle claps, polite, but genuine. One noble tosses a coin wrapped in silk onto the stage. Another drops a plum. Perhaps that's the tradition. Payment by produce. You stand and stretch, your limbs pleasantly heavy, your face still warmed by laughter. The air smells like sweet smoke and cedar. The breeze has returned, tugging softly at the lanterns and encouraging everyone to move along, slowly, into the night's next scene. Just beyond the theater, a corridor of tall grasses opens up. Fireflies blink lazily in and out of existence, as if unsure whether to stay awake or doze mid-flight. The mood shifts again, from cheerful to thoughtful, from echoing voices to the hush of footsteps in dew-touched grass. Hidetaka tucks the jar of plums into his sleeve. "The next garden is quieter," he says. "But the stories there are louder than you'd think." You nod. You're ready. Ahead lies a space for whispers, secrets, and maybe a little poetry scrawled on a fan. But for now, you follow the fireflies, they seem to know the way. The path narrows again, this time into a shaded lane flanked by rustling reeds and low stone lanterns growing mossy with age. You feel the laughter from the puppet show still lingering in your ribs, like a gentle echo, but here, the mood shifts, softens. It's quieter. Not solemn, just inward. The kind of quiet that makes you want to whisper, even if you're alone. The grasses give way to a clearing, and there it is, the poetry grove. It isn't marked on any map, at least none that Hidetaka ever mentions. It exists partly in place, and partly in tradition, shaped by centuries of courtly habits and stolen afternoon hours. The trees here are tall and unusually spaced, their canopies barely touching. Sunlight filters through in warm ribbons, casting golden squares across the path like forgotten stanzas. You come to a cluster of smooth stones arranged in a gentle spiral. At the center stands a simple wooden post with a tiny shelf just wide enough for ink, brush, and folded paper. This is where you pause. You're not here to be entertained. You're here to compose. In the Nara court, poetry wasn't just a pastime, it was an essential skill, as fundamental as calligraphy or courtly bowing. It could win you favor, settle a romantic dilemma, or delicately express that someone's seasonal kimono color choices were a little gauche. It was also a way to be known without fully revealing yourself. A clever metaphor, a moonlit image, just enough to hint, never enough to corner. You take a seat on a nearby bench. The wood is worn smooth by centuries of quiet thoughts. Hidetaka, rather diplomatically, finds a stump some paces away and busies himself with a pocket scroll. The unspoken rule here, poetry is personal. Even when shared, from your perch, you notice dozens of tiny poems hanging from the trees, inked onto silk scraps. Bark strips, even a few leaves. Some are penned in immaculate calligraphy. Others look like they were written by someone halfway through a sneeze. But all are respected, fluttering gently in the wind, their meaning whispered only to those who truly care to look. One reads, "Beneath this pine tree / my thoughts fall like camellias, / soft, pointless, perfect." Another, less elegant but just as sincere, "Was that your sleeve brush, / or just the wind being rude, / either way, I'm cold." Historians still argue whether poetry during the Nara period was strictly a court activity or if it extended to merchants, monks, and other less silked folk. Some claim everyone dabbled, like the Heian-era karaoke party precursor. Others insist it remained a refined privilege. The truth probably lives somewhere in the middle, wrapped in metaphor, hiding behind plum blossoms. There's an old legend about a lady-in-waiting who wrote 1,000 poems in a single rainy season, each one describing the same turtle. Her goal? To impress a prince known for his fondness of reptiles and brevity. Whether she succeeded or simply inspired future turtle haiku clubs is unclear. What's clear, dedication has always been romantic. You're handed a brush and a narrow strip of mulberry paper. The bristles are soft, the ink faintly scented, charcoal, pine sap, and just a hint of nostalgia. You try to think of something clever. Then you stop trying, and something gentle floats to the surface instead. In the teacup's curve / I find your voice again, low / like dusk in my chest. You hang it on a branch with fingers that feel suddenly delicate. Hidetaka pretends not to read it but offers you a candy from his sleeve in quiet approval. Nearby, a pair of women sit back to back on separate stones, both scribbling furiously. Every few minutes, one glances over her shoulder. Rival muses, perhaps. Or best friends pretending otherwise. A sparrow hops between the ink bowls, clearly unbothered by centuries of human emotion echoing around its tiny feet. It snatches a sesame seed and flits off. A critic, no doubt, you explore the grove a little more. Some poems are older than they look, preserved by the shade and the reverence of passers-by. Others are fresh, their ink still wet, trailing slightly where the brush hesitated. There's no judgment here, only the quiet agreement that trying to capture a fleeting feeling is a noble kind of futility. At the far edge of the grove, a narrow scroll has been tied to a low branch with red thread. It reads, "If I write of you / will the moon feel jealous, or / just nod in silence?" You smile. It's either charming or overcooked. Possibly both. But somehow, it fits perfectly here. Before leaving, Hidetaka leads you to a shallow stream at the grove's edge. Here, it's customary to release one poem, written not for others, but for forgetting. You watch him kneel, scrawl something quickly, then let it drift away. The paper unfurls slightly as it floats, revealing only the word maybe. You kneel, too. You write another poem, not meant for anyone's branch. A private moment, to be carried downstream into legend or sewage, depending on how the pipes are laid. You fold it twice, release it, and watch it wobble over a rock before spinning out of view. You rise lighter. Poetry doesn't solve much, you realize. But it doesn't need to. It just needs to exist, to make a quiet sound when it falls like a petal. Ahead lies a garden of scent and spice, where court physicians once dabbled in curious remedies and recipes. But for now, you leave the grove with the faintest smile and ink still drying on your fingertips. The scent reaches you before the space does, soft tendrils of clove, cedar, and something vaguely medicinal, like a very polite ointment. You follow the trail past a bamboo gate and into a garden unlike the others. This one is functional, in the most delightfully poetic sense. It's the apothecary courtyard, where the court's physician scholars once tinkered with tonics, teas, and the occasional overly confident mushroom. The space is a careful balance of wild and ordered. Raised beds of herbs spiral out from a central stone basin, around which several small jars sit neatly labeled with characters for things like calm, vigorous breath, and maybe don't drink this one. Wooden signs poke from the soil, carved with tiny notes in fading ink. One reads, "Harvest only on the third moon." Another, "Pairs poorly with eel." You pass by a cluster of shiso plants, their leaves a deep green with frilly edges that seem to wave hello. Nearby, there's ashitaba, tomorrow's leaf, so named because if you pluck one today, a new one sprouts overnight. Resilient, slightly smug plants. A low table has been set with bowls of dried herbs, each arranged like a painter's palette. Yamogi for circulation. Licorice root for sweetness and the occasional throat complaint. Ginseng for, well, everything, if the court scrolls are to be believed. One root to rule them all, Hidataka mutters, shaking his head at a gnarled specimen that resembles either a human figure or a very stressed carrot. In the Nara court, the role of the physician was equal parts healer, herbalist, and low-key alchemist. Their prescriptions could be practical, like boiling mulberry bark for a cough, or adventurous. There's a record of a treatment involving crushed pearls, deer antler, and a very serious chant. Historians still argue whether these concoctions were believed to work, or were simply a luxurious way to justify gnawing on expensive minerals. You settle onto a cushion beside a table where a court apprentice would have once prepared daily blends. You're invited to make your own. A sleep tonic, of course. Hidataka helps you scoop toasted rice kernels, chamomile blossoms, and a pinch of ground persimmon into a clay teapot. This won't make you smarter, he says, but it will make your dreams smell nice. You pour the hot water slowly, the steam rising like incense for the soul. The scent is earthy, warm, and strangely nostalgic, like the memory of a nap you haven't taken yet. As you sip, he tells you about one of the oddest remedies preserved in a scroll titled Scent of the Second Moon. It involved burning a mix of plum pits, silk ash, and dried frog skin to ward off excessive sighing. The results? Unclear. But apparently, the scent was very effective at keeping visitors away. Perhaps that was the point. A squirrel scampers across the roof above, knocking a small gourd from its perch. It lands with a dull thump near your feet and rolls a bit. "Ah," Hidataka says, nodding. The melancholia gourd. Rarely effective, but satisfying to kick. You try it. He's not wrong. Beyond the herbs, there's a section of the courtyard set aside for seasonal balances. This involved aligning bodily health with nature's rhythms, which sounds lovely until you learn it meant eating pickled radish for 7 days straight every time it rained before sunrise. Even court nobles eventually rebelled. One famously wrote a poem comparing his stomach to a weeping melon, but the belief in harmony ran deep. Illness wasn't just something that happened to the body, it was a sign of imbalance between self, society, and season. The court's goal wasn't just treatment, it was reintegration. A poetic way of saying, stop arguing with your cousin, wear less red, and maybe drink this soup. You stroll further into the garden, passing a tree with paper charms tied to its branches. Some request healing. Others, more cryptically, ask for fewer ants. One simply says, "May I sleep through next winter entirely." You hope that one works out. Near the garden's edge is a collection of ceramic jars sealed with wax. A wooden placard warns, open only during eclipses or dramatic heartbreak. Tempting, but perhaps best left unopened tonight. Historians still debate whether these medical practices were more ritual than remedy, but what's undeniable is the care embedded in the process. Whether or not the tea cured your cough, someone made it with intention. Whether or not the chant restored your balance, someone believed you deserved to be whole. The last corner of the courtyard contains a series of small wooden drawers, each one part of a larger apothecary cabinet. Hidataka opens one, revealing tiny slips of parchment. Fortune remedies. You pull one at random. It reads, for rest, avoid dragons, regret, and second helpings of eel, reasonable enough. You finish your tea, letting the last drops linger on your tongue. There's something comforting about the mild bitterness. Not every medicine needs to be sweet. Some just need to say, I'm here. The courtyard fades behind you as you follow the lanternlit trail toward the next garden, one devoted to elegance, etiquette, and things that sound simple but never are, the art of walking well, choosing the right fan, and not accidentally insulting someone with your sleeve length. But for now, your breath is slower, your limbs a little softer, your mind gently humming with ginseng and pine. You return to the main path just as a breeze rustles through the bamboo, one of those perfectly timed gusts that seem scripted, like nature's own stage cue. Ahead lies a garden arranged with precision, grace, and a touch of knowing arrogance. Everything here whispers, refinement. This is the courtyard of courtly manners, and if you thought tea etiquette was precise, wait until you see what passes for walking correctly. You step onto smooth flagstones laid in deliberate, uneven patterns. It's not random, each one forces you to slow down, to pause mid-step, to consider the rhythm of your movement. Welcome to the art of a rookie kata, walking as performance. Every noble, especially the women of the court, was trained to walk just fast enough to suggest busyness, but slow enough to look uninterested. It's like gliding through molasses with purpose, Hidetaka demonstrates. He takes a few deliberate steps, his sleeves swaying just so, his gaze fixed softly ahead like he's seen something wistful in the distance, possibly a plum blossom, possibly a tax exemption. You try to follow, and immediately kick a stone. Elegance, he says without turning, is mostly about pretending that didn't happen. In Nara, refinement wasn't an accessory, it was identity. Your poise could elevate your family. Your fan technique could open doors. Your bow could accidentally insult a visiting diplomat if it dipped even slightly below his rank. Historians still argue whether these rules were followed sincerely or simply used as tools for subtle warfare. Either way, someone definitely lost sleep over the angle of a sleeve. Speaking of sleeves, this garden has a whole section dedicated to the visual language of robes. Colors had seasonal meanings, emotional tones, even secret romantic signals. Wearing lavender in early spring. Playfully forward. Crimson in the heat of summer. Exhausting, but bold. A particular shade of blue, used only during mourning, was once mistakenly worn to a festival. That poor soul spent the rest of the night pretending their outfit was an avant-garde statement on transience. Bold, but exhausting, you approach a small pavilion where fans are displayed like prized relics. Not ornamental ones, communication fans. Think of them as the emojis of the Nara court. The way you held your fan, open or closed. Right hand or left, tipped just so, could express everything from flirtation to mild irritation. One particularly cutting gesture involved hiding your mouth behind your fan and then turning slightly away. It said, "I'm laughing at you," but elegantly. You're handed a fan. Lacquered wood, painted with a cluster of cherry blossoms and a tiny deer near the edge. You practice a few moves, flourish, conceal, tilt, and promptly flick it into a bush. Hidetaka retrieves it wordlessly. Many romances began this way, he says, brushing off a leaf. Courtship, after all, was an intricate dance. Letters passed in folded silks. Poetry exchanged through intermediaries. Glances timed to moonlight. And always, an awareness of the right posture. One court lady was said to have won the heart of a senior minister simply by how she adjusted her robe while sneezing. Whether this is fact or just an early example of poetic exaggeration remains, of course, up for debate. At the garden's far end lies a circle of flat stones, each with a character etched into the surface. These were part of a court game, somewhere between performance training and low-stakes gossip. A noble would be asked to step from stone to stone while answering riddles, all while maintaining perfect balance, sleeve grace, and appropriate facial serenity. If they stumbled or smirked, the audience was expected to blink slowly and say nothing. While absolutely remembering every detail to repeat later, you try the stone circle. Step, pose, step, almost trip, recover with an unnecessarily deep bow. Hidetaka claps once, possibly in appreciation, possibly to scare off a lizard, near the stone circle. A willow tree droops its branches like gossip at a garden party. Underneath sits a single bench, the kind someone might accidentally find themselves on with the person they weren't supposed to be thinking about. One poem carved into the wood reads, "Your sleeve brushed mine, not by chance, not quite, we both turned away, but not fully." The Nara court ran on such moments. A turn of the head. The placement of a foot. The measured pause between two words. It was less about perfection, more about performance, convincing others you were effortless, even if your inner monologue was mostly, "Don't trip. Don't sweat. Don't sneeze." As the sun begins to droop behind the palace roofs, the garden glows. Golden light catches on silken drapes drying from a line. A peacock cries somewhere off stage. You realize that all of this, the fans, the steps, the choreographed indifference, is a kind of theater. But not for deception. For beauty. A shared understanding that the world is messy, but here, for a moment, it doesn't have to be. You pass a basin of water beside the exit, customary to dip your hands before leaving, to symbolically cleanse yourself of pretense. The water is cool. You flick your fingers dry like a courtier and pretend not to notice when a droplet lands in your eye. Ahead, Hidetaka waves you toward a wooden bridge leading to the final garden, the moon viewing pavilion. But before that, a quick detour. There's one last hidden alcove, filled with musical instruments, forgotten lullabies, and the softest sound in the entire palace, but we'll whisper about that in a moment. A quiet turn off the main path leads you down a corridor where the world seems to hush itself. Even the cicadas hold their breath. Here lies the smallest, most secret of the palace gardens, the lullaby niche. A shaded alcove flanked by stone lanterns, mossy steps, and wind chimes that barely dare to sound. You cross under a wooden beam wrapped in ivy and duck through a doorway barely taller than your head. It's meant to make you bow, whether you want to or not. Inside, the garden opens like a sigh. The centerpiece, a shallow reflecting pool edged with polished stones, where moonlight once shimmered like silk even on cloudy nights, thanks to a clever trick involving mica dust and a slight incline in the stonework. You sit on a smooth bench that creaks politely beneath you. To one side rests a wooden cabinet of musical instruments, kotos, biwas, flutes, and a drum so small it looks like a child's toy. You reach for the biwa, a pear-shaped lute, and run your fingers over the strings. They buzz faintly. Not in tune, but charmingly stubborn, like the court's lesser musicians. Hidetaka appears with a grin and what looks like a folded scroll in his hands. "Lullabies," he says. "But not for children. For nobles too anxious to sleep." He unfurls the scroll and reads the titles aloud, "For minds too full of poetry, against ghosts who only visit Tuesdays, to forget one's own name temporarily." You raise an eyebrow. "That one's popular," he confirms. He hands you a copy of the last song, the court's most famous lullaby, Shirage no Yum, the Silver Dream. It was said to be composed by a court lady who hadn't slept in 6 nights due to the emotional burden of watching 2 cherry blossoms fall at the same time. Historians still argue whether she was exaggerating, exhausted, or just that poetic. Possibly all three. The melody is simple, just 3 notes repeated like a spiral. You hum it softly, and the garden seems to settle. A frog plops into the pond. Somewhere, a flute joins in. You turn. Hidetaka's playing with his eyes half closed, the breathy tones floating like incense. You lie back on the bench, staring up through a gap in the roof slats. Vines curl above like lazy dragons. The song continues. Its purpose, Hidetaka explains, wasn't necessarily to lull the listener to sleep, but to make them forget why they were trying so hard to stay awake. This garden wasn't part of the official layout. It was built by a retired concubine who decided, after 30 years of whispering other people to sleep, she'd like a place to whisper to herself. Her portrait still hangs in a shadowy corner, an older woman with proud eyes and a single cherry blossom tucked behind her ear. Her biography is barely 4 lines long, but her lullaby scrolls take up an entire shelf. You wander toward a set of carved wooden chimes suspended from a beam. Each one bears a different note. Some are low and earthy, others high and tinny. You tap one gently. It sounds like the sigh of a very well-rested bee. Together, they form what was known as the sleep scale, a sequence played by attendants at the end of nighttime poetry readings. If played slowly and in reverse, it was meant to dissolve memories of unflattering verses. According to palace legend, one nobleman took this too literally and lost all knowledge of a particularly bad haiku he'd written about frogs. A loss to history, Hidetaka says, barely hiding a smirk. Or a gift, you sit beside the reflecting pool again. There's a tray of sleep charms resting near the edge, small cloth pouches filled with dried mugwort, clove, and just a hint of roasted barley. Each one is stitched with a word, stillness. Float. A knot. You choose float and slip it into your sleeve. The weight is nothing. The intention is everything. You spot a small book half hidden behind the instrument cabinet. It's a collection of court dreams. Written down in delicate calligraphy, they range from the lyrical to the completely unhinged. One noblewoman dreamed of turning into a koi fish and attending a political debate. Another reported a dream where all the cherry blossoms refused to bloom until she apologized to them. And one monk simply wrote, "I dreamt of silence so complete it made sound itself nervous." That last one sticks with you. You rise slowly, your body tuned now to the hush of this space. As you pass the cabinet again, you leave a note on a slip of parchment, as tradition allows, "Let me remember only the softest things tonight." You slide it into a crack between the instrument drawers, where dozens of others have been folded over time. A paper murmuration of wishes, regrets, and sleepy little prayers. Hidetaka holds the curtain open as you step back into the evening air. The wind has picked up again, but it doesn't bite. It cradles. The next stop is the moon viewing pavilion, where the court once gathered to watch the sky perform. But first, one last glance at the garden behind you. You hear the faint notes of the biwa again, though no one is playing. Some sounds linger, even when they end. You hum the silver dream melody as you walk. It feels like a memory you just invented. You step onto the wooden floor of the moon viewing pavilion just as the full moon begins to rise, spilling pale light over the garden like a silk blanket. This is the crown jewel of the Nara palace grounds, a place where courtiers gathered to drink sake, compose poems, and try not to accidentally insult the emperor by mentioning the wrong constellation. The air is cool but soft, with the scent of pine and damp earth weaving through the delicate chatter. You settle beside a low lacquered table set with delicate porcelain cups and a small bowl of freshly picked yatsuhashi, the cinnamon-scented sweets favored by the nobility. You take a bite, the spicy warmth dissolving slowly, a perfect companion to the crisp moonlight. Here, the art of moon viewing, tsukimi, was more than just admiring the glowing orb. It was an immersive experience, a poetic dialogue between you, the moon, and the delicate world of shadows it cast. Courtiers believed the moon held messages from the spirits, even hints about upcoming seasons or court intrigues. Historians still argue whether the reverence was spiritual or simply an excuse to drink more sake under a pretty sky. You trace the moon's pale circle with your eyes, following the flicker of a lantern across the garden pond. The water's surface is a perfect mirror, reflecting trees and blossoms upside down as if offering a secret twin world. Small koi ripple the surface, their scales catching the moonlight in flashes of silver and jade. One fish glides so close you swear it's aware of your presence, as if it's both part of the garden and a silent observer. Nearby, a group of courtiers quietly chant a seasonal poem, their voices low and rhythmic. The words float gently into the night air, telling of cherry blossoms fading and autumn winds rising. You realize that every phrase is measured not just for meaning but for how it sounds when whispered at night, soothing, hypnotic, and just a little melancholy. In one corner, an ancient lacquered box holds small charms and folded notes, tokens exchanged during moon viewing gatherings. Lovers sent secret poems folded into origami cranes. Friends exchanged tiny scrolls with hopes for health or fortune. You pick up one faded note and unfold it carefully. It reads, "May your nights be as calm as this silver light, and your dreams as clear as this still pond." The handwriting is elegant, but you wonder how many of those wishes truly came true. You lean back against a wooden pillar, the scent of pine resin mixing with the faint sweetness of incense burning nearby. It's the perfect moment to reflect on how the moon-watching rituals threaded the court together, uniting lonely souls under one sky, encouraging contemplation and shared silence. Some scholars suggest this was one of the earliest forms of social mindfulness, though others caution it may have been more about displaying wealth and cultural knowledge. You spot a cluster of fireflies flickering just beyond the pavilion. Their tiny lights mimic stars, reminding you that the court's enchantment wasn't just celestial but earthly too. Courtiers sometimes released lanterns to guide the fireflies, a gentle attempt to tame nature's whimsy into their carefully ordered world. As the night deepens, you notice the subtle play of shadows on the tatami mats. Moonlight creates patterns that seem to shift as you move, like a slow-moving painting. A gentle wind rustles through the pines, carrying the faintest echo of a flute melody from the distant garden. It's as if the moon itself is humming a lullaby. You think about the courtiers here centuries ago, wrapped in silk and poetry, trying to capture fleeting beauty before it vanished with the dawn. Their rituals weren't just about looking outward but turning inward, embracing stillness, and savoring the ephemeral. Eventually, the chill nudges you to rise. You step off the pavilion into the soft gravel path, the moon now high and full overhead. Ahead lies the palace, glowing faintly through the trees, inviting you back into the warmth and ritual of court life. But before you cross that threshold, you pause once more to look back at the garden bathed in moonlight, a quiet reminder that some nights are made for simply being, under a sky that holds 1,000 stories yet untold. You follow the soft gravel path away from the pavilion, stepping lightly beneath arching branches heavy with lingering blossoms and the sweet scent of early summer. The palace looms ahead, a gentle glow from paper lanterns flickering behind translucent shoji screens. Tonight, the air hums with quiet anticipation, an evening not for grand ceremonies, but for the intimate rhythms of daily life within these walls. Inside, the corridors are a patchwork of soft shadows and pools of warm light. The scent of incense mingles with roasted chestnuts, simmering quietly in iron kettles. You pause at a low doorway and slip inside, greeted by the gentle murmur of conversation and the rhythmic click of wooden geta sandals on polished floors. This is the heart of evening routines. Nobles and attendants settle into small groups, sipping mild sake and sharing whispered poems or stories from distant provinces. The mood is subdued but cozy, a contrast to the daylight's strict formality. You find a seat beside a lacquered table, watching a servant carefully arrange a tray of delicate sweets and tea. Tea itself was more than a drink, it was a ceremony, a moment of meditative calm. But in Nara, the practice was still evolving. Historians still argue whether the early tea ceremonies were truly about mindfulness or simply an excuse to show off rare imports from China. Either way, the steaming cup in your hands offers comfort. A warm anchor in the shifting currents of court life. Nearby, an elderly noblewoman hums softly, plucking at a small koto. Her song is a lullaby, one handed down through generations, said to soothe restless minds and bring peaceful dreams. You recognize the melody, it's familiar from the lullaby niche, slightly altered to fit the flickering light of evening fires. Conversation drifts to curious topics, the odd laws still enforced quietly in the palace, such as forbidding laughter louder than a whisper after dusk, the peculiar habit of wearing multiple layers of silk robes, even in summer heat, and the rumored origins of a forgotten invention. An early form of paper umbrella designed to protect delicate hairdos from sudden rain. You listen as a young courtier describes a recent morning ritual involving fragrant oils and the precise arrangement of hairpins to invite good fortune. The attention to detail is staggering, but also strangely soothing, the kind of obsessive care that turns daily routine into art. As you let the sounds and smells wash over you, a gentle drowsiness begins to settle. The room feels like a soft cocoon, and even the quiet footsteps passing through the hall seem part of a slow dance toward rest. In this moment, the palace is less a place of power and more a home, a patchwork of whispered secrets, shared warmth, and the timeless human need for comfort. You take one last sip of tea, feeling the warmth spread through your chest like a quiet promise. Outside, the night deepens. Somewhere, a faint flute melody drifts on the breeze, a gentle farewell until dawn. You step from the warm glow of the palace corridors back into the garden's moonlit embrace, each gravel crunch underfoot softening into a steady rhythm. The night air carries a faint hint of incense from distant shrines, mingling with the cool sweetness of lingering blossoms. You trudge along a winding path lined with recumbent stone lanterns, their pale light pooling like liquid moonbeams across your path. Somewhere nearby, a deer flicks its tail. Don't let the adorable face fool you. Local legend insists they recite stray waka lines when they think nobody's listening. You pause to listen, but hear only the soft susurration of leaves swaying in the gentle breeze. It's common knowledge that Nara remained Japan's capital until 794 CE. And these gardens played a nightly role in the court's life, patrolled by guards to ward off prowlers and soothe restless courtiers alike. You pass beneath a low-hanging branch, brushing fingertips over petals so pale they seem almost translucent by moonlight. Historians still argue whether nightly patrols were intended as security measures or secret romantic strolls for star-crossed lovers, but either way, someone walked this path under the same glow. Ahead, you cross a stone bridge arching over a narrow koi stream. The water shimmers in silver flashes as fish slip beneath lily pads, their dark shapes dancing like scattered thoughts. A court musician once claimed that watching koi at night could cure insomnia, though fringe sources attribute that cure to the fact that koi are notoriously bad conversationalists. You lean on the bridge railing, feeling the heft of smooth wood beneath your fingers, and breathe in the mossy scent rising from the stream's edge. Beyond the bridge, the path narrows between ancient oaks and blossoming cherries. Their intertwining branches form a living tunnel where moonlight filters through in shifting patterns, painting your robe with mottled shadows. You feel as though you're walking through a slow-moving film reel, each scene more serene than the last. A light breeze carries the distant echo of a koto string, though no musician stands nearby, another whispered mystery of Nara nights. You round a curve to find a small alcove illuminated by a single lantern nestled in the crook of a twisted juniper. Beneath it rests a lacquered bench, offering a perfect vantage point for one last pause. You sit, pressing the cool wood into your back, and allow the hush to settle around you like a soft blanket. Somewhere in the distance, someone quietly hums the silver dream lullaby, its three-note refrain hanging suspended between reality and reverie. As you rest, you recall that moonlit walks were more than just leisure, they were believed to cleanse the mind of lingering anxieties, preparing courtiers to face another day of rigid rituals. Some texts describe these promenades as nocturnal purification rites, though others dismiss that as courtly hype. The debate continues. Regardless, the ritual remains restorative. You rise from the bench and continue onward, stepping carefully over a patch of moss where a fallen blossom has settled like a tiny boat. You pause to tuck it gently into your sleeve, adding it to the collection of tokens you've gathered. Each one carries a memory, a whisper of laughter under lanterns, a taste of cherry jelly at noon, a note of poetry fluttering on the breeze. A final stretch brings you to the garden's exit, marked by a small wooden gate carved with swirling cloud motifs. As you push it open, the garden sighs one last time, petals drift down as if bidding farewell. You step through and find yourself back in the palace courtyard, lantern light reflecting off polished tiles. The hush returns to its daytime pace, but you carry the night serenity within you. Before settling in the emperor's sleeping chambers, well, not literally, of course, Instagram would implode, you pause and look back at the gate's silhouette against the moon. A last cheeky thought crosses your mind, even emperors probably needed a good night's rest. You pat your pocket where the dream talisman and folded poem await, a gentle reminder of the journey you've taken, and now, with moonlit paths behind you and soft dreams ahead, you drift toward the warm glow of flickering torches, and deeper into slumber. Now, as the echoes of lanterns fade and petals settle on silent paths, let your breath ease into a softer pattern. Feel the night's cool hush settle over your shoulders, gentle as a whispered promise. Every step you've taken through shaded arches and moonlit bridges has woven a quiet tapestry of memory and calm, a lullaby spun from stone, blossoms, and hushed poetry. Allow your thoughts to untangle, unspooling slowly like lantern light drifting across water. You've tasted cherry-scented breezes, heard the faint pluck of koto strings, and felt moss and polished wood beneath your fingers, each sensation a quiet note in tonight's gentle composition. Release any tension still nesting in your shoulders or your jaw, letting it dissolve in the same soft glow that illuminated those winding alleys. Imagine petals swirling around you one last time, drifting downward in a silent dance until they rest in a hush of mossy gravel. Your mind, unhurried now, can settle into the spaces between thoughts, where dreams gather and linger. Remember that each whispering leaf and each glimmering koi was a companion on this journey, an invitation to unwind and rest. Tonight, carry with you the serene grace of Nara's Sakura Gardens, the playful tales of poetic deer, and the silver-toned lullaby humming softly at the edge of sleep. Let these memories become pillows for your mind, soft and inviting, so that when you close your eyes, you're already walking those lantern-lit paths once more. Drift gently, unburdened, into the realm of dreams, where ancient petals brush against waking thoughts. And know that you can return here anytime, just by remembering the hush, the scent, the hush.